The Archaludon hype train continues. After it took down a 5,000 player tournament in Japan, this deck has been gaining in popularity and been doing very well in tournaments. And even after rotation, Archaludon EX is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into this Archaludon EX post-rotation preview. Rotation is certainly going to hurt Archaludon, at least a little bit. Losing out on the Dialga V and VSTAR line is kind of sad. It gave you an awesome big attacker that could help you skip your opponent's turn, so you could take 2 turns in a row, and that was awesome. We're also losing Radiant Greninja, which is a great way of drawing cards while also getting energy in the discard pile that we could use Archaludon's ability to reattach. We also have Lumineon that is going away, which was a nice way of grabbing the supporter cards we needed. In spite of that, Archaludon continues to be one of the stronger decks in the format. Shoutouts to Omnipoke for compiling the City League results from Japan and giving all of the decks championship points based on how successful they've been. And Archaludon is in the top 5 of decks. I think that Archaludon just inherently is really strong. It does have like one inherent weakness that has been holding it back from being like a top of the top deck, but I do think it is a viable contender going forward. Let's start things off with the most vanilla of vanilla Archaludon lists I could find. This one got 11th place in their City League tournament, and it's very straightforward. We've got the 4/4 line of Archaludon, and Archaludon's just a stage 1 with a lot of HP, and it builds itself up thanks to that Assemble Alloy ability, making it very easy to power up that Metal Defender attack, which is a good 220 damage, and you also just get no weakness after that. That's really nice, but the thing that's always held Archaludon back is the fact that 220 is like 10 HP short of what it really needs to be a top tier or arguably broken at that point. There are a number of different versions of this deck that try and compensate for that lack of damage. This one doesn't really. The only real thing it has is that Relicanth, where you get to copy a move from one of your prior evolutions. So we're copying Duraludon's Raging Hammer here, and we get to do 80 damage plus the 10 more damage for each damage on our Archaludon. So this can scale to a point where you're one-hit KOing anything in the game, but you have to take a hit first in order for this to count. Really useful card in this deck, but it doesn't fully cover the suite of attack scenarios that I personally would want in my Archaludon deck. But if you want to play the core shell of Archaludon, I think this list is totally fine. The stadium of choice here is Jamming Tower, which is going to shut off all tools. And I think in particular, one of the big new tools coming in is Lily's Pearl that forces Lily's Pokemon to drop 1 prize less. So if you can turn that off, you can take 2 prizes on those Clefairy EXs, which seem to be very popular post-rotation, not just in a Lily deck, but just being teched into a number of different decks as a counter for Dragon Pokemon like Dragapult. So going heavy on the Jamming Tower here, I don't mind it. This second Archaludon has a little bit more spice, but is still very vanilla relative to some of the other lists we're going to look at later. One of the interesting techs is this Archaludon from Stellar Crown, where its Metal Bridge ability gives all of your Pokemon that have metal energy attached to them no retreat cost. This can be a fantastic way of pivoting between different attackers. When one of your Archaludons gets damaged, you can hide it back on the bench while pivoting into a different attacker. I guess theoretically you could also use its Iron Blaster attack for 2 metal and a colorless, does 160 damage, and during your next turn this Pokemon can't attack. And this could service as a single prize attacker if you were taking something out like a Squawkabilly on the opposing bench. Hop Zacian EX is a card that pairs really well with Archaludon, though this particular build only has 1 copy of Hop Zacian and doesn't have any of the spicy Hop techs here. So we're largely using this just for that close cleave attack where it does 30 damage to the active and 30 to the bench. There's no other damage modifiers other than Black Belt's training. So we're doing vanilla level damage with the snipe attack, though 30 and 30 can be enough to soften up some big basics for Archaludon to take out later. And theoretically, yes, you could use Brave Slash for 240 damage. It is 4 energy and it's very expensive, but Archaludon can cover a lot of that cost if you really wanted to throw all that energy on there. One way in which this deck compensates for Archaludon's damage output is Black Belt's Training, where when you play this card, you're doing plus 40 damage on opposing Pokemon EX, at which point Archaludon is swinging for 260, which is a much better number. You're going to be taking out all of the big basics in the game, while also taking out some of the smaller stage 1s as well, such as a Goldengo EX is going to fold to 1 Metal Defender attack after playing Black Belt's Training. Now let's transition into more of a hybrid build where we have Archaludon merging with Hop. We still have a 4-3 line of Archaludon as our primary attacker and that Relicanth so that Archaludon can copy Duraludon's Raging Hammer attack, but we have more of the Zacian as well as all of its support pieces. So we still have that bench sniping attack with Close Cleave, and then Brave Slash can do massive damage, but we also have all of the damage modifiers, including Hop's Snorlax, which adds plus 30 damage to all of Hop's Pokemon, Hop's Choice Band, which adds 30 damage to all of Hop's Pokemon while also reducing the attack cost by 1, and then also Postwick Stadium, which adds another 30 damage boost. At that point, Hop's Zacian can swing for 330 damage with that Brave Slash for only 3 energy, while also doing Close Cleave can be upwards of 120 damage to the active, still 30 to the bench, but 120 to the active for 0 energy, giving you even more opportunities to take your opponent down in different ways. Hop's Cramorant is also here. Its Fickle Spit attack for only 1 colorless energy does 120 damage, making it a really nice single prize attacker, but it only works if your opponent has exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining. So it's going to be something you're going to slip into the middle of the match to either take out a smaller Pokemon or using it to soften up a bigger target. But being able to skew the prize race with a single prize attacker is always nice. As a form of draw support, Tatsugiri is here, allowing us to look at the top 6 cards of our deck and put a supporter card we find there into our hand. Of course, Tatsugiri has to be in the active, so we have the rescue board in there so that after a knockout, Tatsugiri can grab a supporter card and then you just pivot into the appropriate attacker. Iris's Fighting Spirit is a new card that we're getting in Journey Together. It lets you discard a card from your hand and then draw until you have 6 cards in hand. This is a great way of drawing more cards while also getting energy into the discard pile for Archaludon to attach. Kieran is a multi-purpose supporter card. You can use it just to switch your active Pokemon out with something from the bench, or you can use it for plus 30 damage on Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. Now, the Pokemon V part's not going to matter post-rotation because the Pokemon V are all gone, but plus 30 on Pokemon EX is huge as that pushes Archaludon's damage up to 250, making it able to one-hit KO almost every big basic in the game. Archaludon EX already has 300 HP, but you can add a little bit of bulk here with the Rigid Band, making it take 30 less damage. This player also added Super Potion into their deck. This is a card we've had in the past that is coming back as part of Journey Together. It lets you heal 60 damage from one of your Pokemon, and if you do, you have to discard an energy attached to that Pokemon. It's not that big of a deal for Archaludon because it's really easy to set up, and attaching from hand to cover that energy that you discarded is not that big of a deal. I'm not sure 60 HP is enough, but maybe it is. This Archaludon Hop deck has even more techs in it, including Monkey Dory, where you get to move 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon if Monkey Dory has a dark energy attached to it. It's not that hard to use your attach from hand to attach to Monkey Dory because Archaludon can power itself up, and you can use this in particular to take out stuff like Badoo, which can be really annoying with that item lock. So you can use Monkey Dory to move 3 damage counters, take out the Badoo, and then ideally one of your other attackers is taking prizes by knocking out the active. Latias EX gives your basic Pokemon free retreat. Unfortunately, Archaludon can't take advantage of it, but there are other scenarios where you'll want to pivot between your basic Pokemon. In particular, in the endgame, you might want to pivot into Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. This has the ability where its attack cost comes down by 1 for each prize card your opponent has taken. So if your opponent's taken 4 prizes, you can pivot in Blood Moon Ursaluna and swing for 240 damage for only 1 energy. And if your opponent's taken 5 prizes, you can use this for 0 energy. And oftentimes you don't want to have Blood Moon Ursaluna preemptively on the board, so you can have something else that's a basic Pokemon go into the active, then bench Blood Moon Ursaluna, and then use Latias's ability in order to get Ursaluna in there for that final hit. This player also techs in 1 copy of Hop's Bag, where you get to search your deck for 2 basic Hops Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. I love this card. I think it's phenomenal. Maybe I would slip more of these Hops Bags into this deck, but because there's also a lot of Archaludon stuff in here too, maybe you don't want to clog the deck with a bunch of Hops Bags. Archaludon Scizor is not as popular of a way to play Archaludon in Japan, but it is seeing some results, and there are a couple of people playing it as well. This variation features Scizor from Obsidian Flames, and in particular, we're using that Punishing Scissors attack, where for only 1 metal energy, we do 10 damage plus 50 more damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability. Not every deck is going to run a lot of abilities, so your mileage with Scizor is going to vary. However, there are a number of meta decks that are using a lot of Pokemon with abilities, and you can potentially take some big one-hit KOs, or at least do a ton of damage with Scizor as a single prize attacker. The second Archaludon Scizor list splits the Scizor between 2 different versions. We've got the one that punishes based on the amount of abilities your opponent has, and then this one also has Scizor EX. It's a stage 1 EX with 270 HP. Its first attack is not great. 2 colorless, you do 70 damage and take 50 damage from attacks on the following turn. This is only really good if you're taking out a single prize basic Pokemon like a Charmander, but Crossbreaker does give you a little more damage output. For 2 metal energy, you discard up to 2 metal energy from this Pokemon, and you do 120 damage for each card you discarded this way. You are going to be able to hit for upwards of 240 damage, which is going to be enough to take out almost all of the big basics in the game, including Raging Bolt EX, and you can power this up very quickly with an Archaludon ability and potentially do that over the course of multiple turns with multiple Archaludons, though I think you probably are going to use this like once and maybe at most twice. I don't have a slide for it, but this deck also has Maximum Belt, which we can see over here, which is going to give you plus 50 damage on attacks towards Pokemon EX, which again is another way of fixing Archaludon's biggest weakness of doing only 220 damage. At that point, you're swinging for 270, which is fantastic, and Scizor EX is hitting for 290 with the belt, which is going to be enough to take out pretty much every stage 1 EX in a single hit as well. Here we have a new take on Archaludon, this time with the Dudunsparce line. The single prize Dudunsparce is a draw engine that lets you draw 3 cards and then shuffle the Dudunsparce and all cards attached to it back into your deck. So really nice draw power here. We also have a tech attacker in Dudunsparce EX. It's got 270 HP, and for 1 colorless energy, Adversity Tail does 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon EX in play. This is going to be a fantastic way of punishing certain decks that run a ton of EX Pokemon. We could even theoretically use Breaking Drill as an attack. For 3 colorless energy, we can attack while ignoring any effects on our opponent's active Pokemon. This gives us a way to hit walling Pokemon like a Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon or a Mimikyu. One way of getting around Archaludon's subpar damage output is by just gusting in the right targets. There are a number of multi-prize Pokemon that Archaludon can one-hit KO, such as Mew EX, Squawkabilly EX, Pheasantipity, and Teal Mask Ogerpon, among others. And this deck goes a little heavy into the gusting side with the new Hops Dubwool, where when you evolve into Dubwool, you can gust one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active spot. And being able to get a gusting option off of a Pokemon is fantastic because you can use your supporter for something else instead. The second take on Archaludon Dubwool is very similar to the last, but it also techs in 1 copy of Hop's Zacian EX, which we've talked about a whole bunch here. Having that snipe attack and potentially that big brave slash is a really nice option for this deck to have. Keep in mind though, this take doesn't have any of the other damage modifiers here, so we're capping out at 240 damage. Admittedly, I thought we were going to see more Revavroom post-rotation than I've seen thus far, but it does make a lot of sense in Archaludon. This 6th place list has a 2/2 line of Revavroom, where it has that Rumbling Engine ability where you can discard an energy and then draw until you have 6 cards in hand. So besides being able to get extra cards, having that energy in the discard pile for Archaludon to attach is very nice. The only trade-off here is that this is a stage 1, so it's going to take some work to get this into play. The second take on Archaludon with Revavroom gets a little crazy. It's got one copy of Scizor with that punishing scissors attack. It also has a Revavroom EX, which is a stage 1 Pokemon, and it has 2 attacks. The first one is Accelerator Flash. For 1 metal energy, you do 20 damage, plus 120 more damage if it moves from the bench to the active. Theoretically, you could use this to hit for 280 for weakness on a lightning weak Pokemon, but I'm not really sure what relevant ones there will be off the top of my head. It also has Shattering Speed, where for 3 metal energy, it does 250 damage, and you discard this Pokemon and all attached cards. It is swinging for more damage than Archaludon does normally, but having to get rid of everything sucks really bad. So I would imagine that this would only be used as a end of game attacker, if at all. One of the coolest synergies in this deck is Larry's Skill. This is a new card from Prismatic Evolutions that I haven't seen before, but I love the application of it here. This lets you discard your hand and search for a Pokemon, a supporter card, and a basic energy card, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So you can grab that Archaludon, for example, grab another supporter card or another Larry's Skill, and then with that basic energy card, you can discard it with the Revavroom and then draw up to 6 cards again. So really cool way of flushing out your hand and refreshing it with more cards. There we go. That is a look at Archaludon EX. I have been a fan of Archaludon, I guess even since before Archaludon was a thing. Duraludon VMAX was one of my favorite Pokemon from the Sword and Shield era, and I was super excited when we found out that we were getting an Archaludon EX. And when I started playing it, I was like, yeah, this deck seems really cool, except for the 220 damage part, but I'm really glad to see that Archaludon is finally shining. And I'm actually in the process of trying to build an actual, well, a paper build of Archaludon EX. I'm not sure if I'm going to go with 4. I've only got 3 copies so far, and I'm a little annoyed that I got the first 2 copies for very cheap when people thought it wasn't good. And then the third one I had to pay a little more because this was after Archaludon was discovered to be good. So I'm kind of hoping I can just go with 3 copies, but if I have to get a 4th one, it's fine. I do love the deck. I haven't decided on which variation I'm going to build, but I am looking forward to the future of Archaludon, and I'm excited to ultimately put it together myself. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In3rdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at In3rdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website In3rdPerson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.